Hello there, Captains, and welcome to Game Fact Files. Today we will analyze one of the most fundamental aspects of deck building, the mana curve. Whether you are playing another card game or One Piece is your first, these principles are universal and will help you become a more strategic and successful player. Before we get started, let me give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover in this video. We'll start explaining what a mana curve is and why it matters. Then we will explain what playing on curve means. Finally, I'll walk you through the steps to construct a deck with a well-balanced mana curve for either constructed or sealed formats. The concept of mana curve was discovered by Jay Schneider, a Magic the Gathering theorist. In One Piece, we pay the cost of events and characters with Dawn, but the original concept used the word mana because this is the name of the resource you have to pay to cast the spells in Magic the Gathering. Where did we get the curve term from? If you take a look at a One Piece deck and group the spells by Dawn cost from left to right, you can make a graph where X is the Dawn cost of the cards, and Y is the quantity of them. While every deck is different, most decks will have the majority of cards in the middle. This usually creates a bell curve, and instead of mana curve, we will refer to it as Dawn curve. Your curve should be efficient, so you can play cards every turn, and this is the reason why most decks don't have a lot of high-cost cards. Because if you draw a lot of them, they will get bricked on your hand, and you will have nothing to play other than using them at the counter phase for blocking. The curve takes this shape because lower Dawn cost cards typically remain valuable throughout the entire game. It's essential to have the ability to play a card early on, but even in the late game, a cost-effective 2 or 3 Dawn card can be the deciding factor between winning and losing. While you draw more cards as the game goes on, you need more copies of cards that cost less and fewer cards that cost more. The curve your deck has depends on how fast you want your deck to be. For example, if you look at an aggressive Zoro deck, you will notice that the curve peaks at the early Dawn cost cards. If you plan on beating your opponent quickly with overwhelming numbers, put more lower cost cards in. If, on the other hand, you want to build a deck that takes a bit to get going but becomes unstoppable once you reach the late game, focus more on the mid-tier cards. It all depends on the metagame that we will analyze in the next weeks. As you maybe have observed, cards' power depends on a lot of factors. Besides the rarity and their ability, their impact grows exponentially with their Dawn cost. The higher the Dawn cost a card has, the stronger it is. If you can play a card that costs the maximum number of Dawn you have in every turn in the game, you are simply playing the strongest card you can each turn. As a rough example of playing on curve, on your first turn you might play a Hannibal. Then at 3 Dawn you might play a Sasaki. At 5 Dawn you might play a Queen. Then at your next turn you might play a King. Imagine a situation of a mirror match, and your opponent can't follow the curve costs. If you have played a King, and he doesn't reply with an equivalent character, or better, he stays behind on the board control. If he casts a character with less stats, he will need to spend more resources to be able to kill your characters, giving you time to act accordingly. While playing on curve gives you a strong advantage on the board, this is not a rule that should be followed by the letter, especially in constructed format. You might have to skip playing Marco on your 5 Dawn and use him at next turn with an Otama so you can kill one of your opponent's characters. Sometimes you get huge advantage by unleashing a lot of 1 Dawn cards instead of playing a 3 Dawn card. A common example is playing Law and filling the board with 1 Dawn characters so you can have Shample's ability early is better than playing a 3 Dawn card like Zoro. In formats like Sealed where the cards are random, the more you play on curve, the better impact you will have on board. The components of your Dawn curve is contained in 3 categories. Low-cost cards. These are your 1 up to 3 Dawn cards. They typically include early game characters and events that can be played in crucial moments of the game. Mid-cost cards. These are your 4 up to 7 Dawn cards. They often include mid-game characters, removals, and cards with moderate impact. High-cost cards. These are your 8+ Dawn cards. They usually consist of late-game powerhouses, game-changing spells, or characters with significant abilities. A balanced Dawn curve provides flexibility. You need to be able to respond to your opponent's plays at various stages of the game, ensuring you're not caught off guard. A well-curved deck will provide you consistency, and will probably ensure that you don't have dead draws, where you're unable to use your Dawn effectively. When you're building your deck, it is crucial to make a distinction between the card's cost with the following rule. You will need to separate the cards by not only the cost they have, but you will need to pile them in the turn you believe you will cast them. For example, guard point costs 1 Don, but you will never play it on the first round, so there is no point of leaving it in the 1 Don cards. Another example is card like Jozu, that is inside the deck for its 2000 counter. You will probably never cast him on your 4 Don. Cards like Magura can't be in your 1 Don cost, because you will never play him in your first round. If we separate the cards that are only used for 2000 counter and events from the main deck, you can only then actually see the real Don curve of your deck. Since we have a pre-release week, and most of you will participate in a sealed event, this should be the main rule about your deck construction. When you finish evaluating the possible cards you are going to use in your deck, you need to set aside your events, 2000 counters and removals, so you can see how fast your deck is, and add cards accordingly to your strategy. The first row of your characters will be the most important, since you will need to have presence on the board. The speed of the format is also dependent on the set. When the set has a lot of early cost characters, most decks will be more aggressive with an early curve, while if the set has slower cards, most decks will be mid-range. A lot of times, you will need to decide between 2 cards to fill a gap in your deck. If their ability is minor, and let's say they both have the same amount of counter, the rule you should follow is to play the cheaper one. You can always play a 4 Don card on 5 Don pool, or a 6 Don card in 7 Don pool, but not vice versa. So instead of having a dead card in your hand, you can have your deck curving early. This rule is only applied on the filler cards, and not for the main core of your deck building. For example, you should consider that while a character costing 3 Don having 5000 power is cheaper than a 5 Don 7000, but the cheap one can get attacked from almost everything on the board, including the opponent's leader, while your 7000 character will be a pain since your opponent will need to invest some of his Don to kill him, giving you a great advantage on the board control. Alright captains, grab your cards, get ready to sharpen your skills, because playing on curve is about to become your secret weapon. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your fellow One Piece enthusiasts, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already.